I'd like to share a few traditional songs with you, a little bit of Welsh folklore, and a folk tale with you. A few weeks ago, I was doing some research for a traditional music festival that I was participating in as a teacher and a performer. And we had a section on sea shanties, and I thought to myself, oh boy, I always see Irish sea shanties or English sea shanties, and I thought, gee, are there any Welsh sea shanties? At the same time, I happened to be corresponding with a gentleman in the Llantwit Major area of Wales, and the Fel Glamorgan, which I myself have a little bit of Welsh family ancestry from these areas. So it was a great interest in me to find perhaps folklore, folk traditions, folk tales, and music from this area. So everything was coming together, and one of these lovely correspondence emails, chatting away with this historian in the Llantwit Major area of Wales, he said to me, there's something I think you would be interested in. He said, do you know that there's a very well-known sea shanty from this part of Wales, the Llantwit Major area of Wales? And I said, really? So I did some more research, and I was so excited because I could sort of fit my own Welsh ancestry, my desire to learn more, and to be authentic in my work that I presented as a teacher and a performer. So with more research, I found out that this song, it's a sea shanty titled Tommy's Gone Away, or it goes by another title, Tommy's Gone to Hilo. This particular sea shanty was recorded in the late 1800s by a gentleman who happened to come from the United States. And while he was in Wales, he happened to be in the Barry area of Wales, and he was hanging around the docks area. And there he heard the sounds of this splendid Welsh voice, and he kept hearing all these Welsh sea shanties. He recorded these sea shanties on what is called wax rolls. And the recordings of these sea shanties and the information about the gentleman who wrote these sea shanties now is in our Library of Congress here in the United States. And this gentleman's name is Rhys Griffith. And again, the title of the song is Tommy's Gone Away, or it's also known as Tommy's Gone to Hilo. And another interesting thing about this sea shanty is it's actually a very, very well-known sea shanty, and sea shanty choirs all around the world love to sing this particular sea shanty. And more interesting information, I kept searching for all I could find out about this sea shanty, is there's a very well-known group of sisters named the McGarrigle sisters. And they were really wonderful folk singers who had the most haunting, the most exquisite harmonies. And after the performances, when they were on tour in the British Isles, they would go to several pubs where they would unwind after performance, and they would always sing Tommy's Gone Away or Tommy's Gone to Hilo at the pub after the show, just to unwind and just sing with the people who were at the pub. And everyone said, why don't you record this? Because it's just so beautiful. And they did. And along the way, the song is performed as a traditional sea shanty, which is a sea shanty was composed by seamen, sailors, as a work song. So they would be doing a chore or they would be working, keeping the rhythm of their work as they sang the sea shanty. Along the way, this particular song also was then picked up by female folk singers who put a different style to it. And perhaps the way the women would sing the song is the way that the sailors and the seamen would hope that their sweethearts at home would be thinking about them, longing for them, missing them, worrying about them and also wondering what they were up to while they were out in the sea. So I'm going to share this wonderful discovery of an old traditional sea shanty that comes from Wales, titled Tommy's Gone Away. Tommy's gone away today, Tommy's gone away. Oh, Tommy's gone away today, my Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone to Swansea town, Tommy's gone away. Oh, he's gone where the girls shout array, Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone to Cardiff Bay, Tommy's gone away. Oh, Tommy's gone where the girls come on down, Tommy's gone away. Oh, Tommy's gone to Liverpool, Tommy's gone away. Oh, he's gone to the noted school, my Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone to Mobile Bay, Tommy's gone away. Oh, he'll screw the cotton all the day, Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone to Singapore, Tommy's gone away. Oh, he's gone to dance on those shores, Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone to Buenos Aires, Tommy's gone away. Where the girls have long black hair, Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone forevermore, Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone forevermore, my Tommy's gone away. Tommy's gone forevermore, Tommy's gone away. Oh, my Tommy's gone forevermore, my Tommy's gone away. So, I would like to share with you a little bit of folklore and another traditional song. So it's been a really wonderful journey trying to search my own Welsh roots and to pursue my passion for folklore and traditional music, traditional songs, and interesting enchanting folktales. In the Pembrokeshire area of Wales, there's a well-known New Year's tradition where young boys and young girls would wake up very early on New Year's Day at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And they would travel to a spring or to their well, and they would gather water. And that water was considered fresh water, new water, clean, clear water. And that water would be placed in a piece of earthenware and sometimes a very special tin that was dedicated just for the New Year's water. They would take the water and they would use a piece of evergreen. Sometimes they would choose a piece of boxwood, a little branch of holly, sometimes a little piece of evergreen or pine, and they would gather the pine, they would gather the tin or the earthenware with the water, and they would travel through the village. And while they were traveling through the village, they would come upon a door, they would give a little knock on that door, and when the person who lived in this house came out, they began to sing a beautiful, absolutely beautiful New Year's carol. And as they began to sing that New Year's carol, they would take the evergreen or the teeny little holly, piece of holly, and dip it into that New Year's water, and they would very, very gently sprinkle it on the homeowner and the family in that particular house. And then they would take their time and they would make sure that they would sprinkle water in all of the rooms in that house. Sprinkling the water was the idea of purifying things, to make things new, to usher in all that's good, all that's clean, all that's pure. And while they did that, they sang this song that's titled Lovey-Doo. And most of the time it was sung just like the sea shanty with no fiddle, no accordion. It was unaccompanied style singing. And this song is titled Lovey-Doo. Here we bring new water from the clear well, for to worship God with this happy new year. Sing lovey-doo, sing lovey-doo, the water and the wine, the 7 bright gold wars, and the bugles that do shine. Sing, rain, fair maiden, with gold upon the toe. Open up the west gate and turn the old year go. Sing lovey-doo, sing lovey-doo, the water and the wine, the 7 bright gold wars, and the bugles that do shine. Sing, rain, fair maid, with gold upon the chin. Open up the west gate and let the new year in. Sing lovey-doo, sing lovey-doo, the water and the wine, oh, the 7 bright, bright stars, and the bugles that do shine. Along with this really beautiful New Year's tradition in the Pembrokeshire area, there's some very interesting May Day traditions as well. May Day is a really beloved holiday, festive, seasonal celebration in Wales. And all over Wales, you will find May Day festivals, May Day events, and May Day Eve events. A big part of May Day was creating bonfires, and bonfires were they were created early in the day before May Day, and people could be quite competitive with the bonfires. And the bonfires had this idea that on May Day Eve, yes, on May Day Eve, the spirits would be about. Those menacing fairies would return, and the witches would return, and everyone was reveling. So the fires were built to keep away the mischievous fairies, to keep away the mischievous spirits, and to keep away those mischievous witches. Along these bonfires, a sack was passed around to people attending the bonfires. And that day, 2 different cakes were made. A oat milk cake was made, and a brown meal cake was made. These 2 cakes were cut into pieces, and the pieces were placed into the sack. So the sack was passed around this big bonfire, and you would reach your hand in, you would pick up a piece of this cake, and you wouldn't know what color of cake you got until you finally pulled it out. Well, if you got the brown piece of cake, the meal cake, then you were the one. Yes, you were the one that would indeed have to jump the bonfire. And you would have to jump it 3 times. And that was jumping it over 1, jumping it over 2, and back again 3. Or you could choose to run from one bonfire in the village to the other bonfire. So you would do this 1 time to this bonfire, then again back to this bonfire, and again and back to the bonfire. The bonfires were also a way of purifying the a sense of purifying, and also, once again, almost like New Year's, bringing in the new. And it held many superstitions. In the morning after the bonfires, when the ashes would cool down, and some of the logs would then be cooled down, and just they were broken bits and pieces, people would come back to the bonfire, and they would collect some of those ashes, and they would take them home, and some of the pieces of the wood, the logs that were used, and they considered this as a good luck symbol. Also, farmers in the village would walk their livestock and their cattle right through those ashes, because it was believed that those little ashes that would gather on the hooves and the feet of the animals would help protect them against any diseases, and it would keep them healthy. Another wonderful part of the May Day celebrations was gathering of the hawthorn. The hawthorn was gathered, and it was strung around the front doors of your home and the front windows of your home. And also, people would make crosses, and they would fashion the crosses out of twigs. And those crosses would be placed on your front door of your home. They would be placed on your steps of your home, and perhaps the path leading up to your home. Once again, they believed on these first few days of May, the fairies were very mischievous, and the witches were very mischievous, and the spirits were about. So these crosses were an attempt to keep those little bad spirits away from your home. The maypole was then raised, and you would have maypole dancing that could last almost all day. And there were May Day games that took place around the maypole. And in the south of Wales, one of the most popular games that they did around the maypole was a mock battle between spring, see her back here, and winter. And what would happen is someone in the village would be selected to represent spring. And spring would be cloaked with fresh flowers and garlands, and winter would be cloaked with wool and dark clothes. And pieces of cotton would be attached to his cloak, and those pieces of cotton would represent the cold, frosty winter weather and snow. And these two would battle each other, and a group of people were sort of on the crew of our winter person, and a bunch of people would be selected to be here with our spring person. Spring would toss flowers or little pieces of willow. They were more fragile and softer. And on winter's side, winter would toss twigs, and they would toss these things at each other in a playful way. And always spring would win. It was sort of pre-planned that spring would win. And today, in a lot of the schools in Wales, children undergo lots of preparation. It's fun. They learn maypole dancing and Morris dancing. So they're prepared to show off their May Day dancing for the May Day crowds when they come to the festivals and May Day celebrations at the schools and in the centers of the town. And sometimes they do the game between spring and winter by using the tug of war. They would have a tug of war with a big rope. So you'd have winter on one side and spring on the other side. And once again, it was pre-planned that spring would always win. There's a different custom in North Wales, and it is called the Cadi Ha. And the Cadi Ha were a group of men who would make a procession, and they would come down the streets in the village, and they were dressed in white shirts. And attached to those white shirts were many ribbons. And they would perform what was called the Cadi Ha Morris dance. And one of the traditions that they had that was quite different from the south part of Wales was that indeed they still had the maypole dancing, but as part of the Cadi Ha procession, they carried a branch of May. calamine. And what's really interesting is the idea of the branch of May, or a decorated fresh a fresh tree branch for May Day, can also be found in the traditions in Ireland. And I have been talking a lot and communicating a lot with the folklorist in Ireland, where he is trying so hard, it's pretty magical what he's doing, is bringing back that tradition of the decorated May bush. So last May, we were unable to have our May Day activities because of COVID, but we weren't going to let that ruin our May Day plans. I tried to encourage people from their homes to just find simple things that they could create their own branch of calamine, and sure enough, they did. So I've been collecting pictures of that and sending it to the gentleman in Ireland who's really quite involved in bringing back these customs in Ireland. So this branch was part of a great big procession that would go down the streets and in the villages in Wales, in North Wales. And they were tied, the tree was tied with ribbons. That's sort of more done in modern times. What's very interesting is in a lot of the folklore information, it's quite detailed that they probably didn't have ribbons when this tradition first started. They would spend days, the boys and girls of the town would spend days going to collect pieces of silver. And it could be silverware as your better pieces of silverware, spoons, knives, and forks, and silver drinking vessels, and most importantly, the children would try to seek out silver watches. And these items were tied to the branch of calamine, and they were part of the procession going down the street. And it was believed that the silver, when the sunlight would hit the silver, what a beautiful show that would give to everyone, beautiful hope. Moving into a new planting season, a new season of gardening, and it was a grand celebration, and everyone in the village would take part in these old rituals. So it'd be nice that while we're here and isolated at home because of COVID, to take some of these really beautiful old traditions and share them with your family. And there's many things that you have at home that you could create these traditions and really enjoy. I'm going to share a really charming folktale with you. And the name of this folktale is titled Melangeth and the Hare. Melangeth was a beautiful, beautiful princess, and she had long, beautiful red hair, as red as the autumn leaves, and she had green, green eyes, as green as the emerald grass in Ireland. In fact, she was from Ireland. She was not just beautiful, but she was very, very different. She was quite unique. She was not really like all the other girls. She liked moments in solitude and many moments in the quiet and just meditating in nature. And she really wasn't that fond of having a husband. However, her father was planning an arranged marriage for her, and this is not what she wanted. So the night before the wedding, she escaped. She got away. She traveled across the Irish Sea, and for all that time, it seemed really like eternity to her. It was very dark and it was very dangerous, but she was determined she wanted no part of that marriage. She found this potential husband to be not of quite good honor, and she wasn't quite sure, but she did dream of becoming a nun, and she didn't know how to pursue that. So there she traveled for days, and she came upon this new, beautiful, beautiful land. And when she came upon the shore, she looked up, and there were beautiful mountains and a dramatic coastline. And this land was indeed Wales. And she traveled for days on foot, and she collected so many of the flowers in Wales. She had never seen so many beautiful wildflowers. And she fed on the berries and the greens and the nuts, and she was quite happy. But she thought, I wish I could find a place to make as a shelter or some type of a home for myself. And then one day, there it was. There was this beautiful flat rock that was alongside a mountain, and it looked over the greenest, most beautiful green valley. And she stopped. She was at such peace. And she began to meditate. She began to sing. Oh, these mountains. Oh, this valley. Oh, these trees. And these sweet creatures around me. And that was it. This was the spot. This flat rock became her bed. This is where she slept. And this land around this big flat rock, this is where she spent her days, so happy and quiet and solitude and praying, one with God. Well, one day, she was knelt down and she was praying. And then all of a sudden, she heard this loud sound, this loud bark, shrilling, barking dogs. And then she heard a horn, and then she heard the sound of men. Well, she hadn't seen a man for days, weeks, months, for years. And then all of a sudden, a hare ran out from the brambles and bushes all around her. And the hare was shaking, and all his eyes were filled with such fear. And she opened up this beautiful blue cloak that she was wearing, and she ushered the hare right under her cloak. And there the cloak stayed, the hair stayed really close to her legs. And all of a sudden, there she was, with all these men, these hunters, right in front of her, and the barking, shrilling dogs, and they kept getting louder, and they kept getting closer and closer and closer to her. And then all of a sudden, one of the men spotted that teeny tiny little hare looking out from under her cloak. And once again, he went to blow that horn. And when he went to blow that horn, the horn froze to his lips. And at that very moment, another man approached. And this wasn't just any other hunter. This was the prince of Palace. And he came upon such a strange scene. For there his hunting dogs, who had been barking and howling and whining, had stopped. They were backing up. They were cowering to the ground. And there his horses were frozen. And there he saw one of his hunters with the horn frozen to his lips, but there he saw the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And that woman had no fear in her. She stood up and she looked at him right in the eyes, and she looked at the hunters right in the eyes. And she said, you see this hare? This hare is under my protection. And the Prince of Palace looked at her and said, why, lady, have you put some type of a spell upon us? Do you carry some magic? And she did not answer him. She just nodded her head very slowly. The Prince of Palace asked his men to leave. He wouldn't speak to her all alone. But when he did, he started to fall in love with her. He found her, yes, to be so beautiful, but she was so courageous and so brave, but she had such a big heart. He said to her, this land here that you have been sleeping here, he said. And she said, yes, that flat rock is where I sleep. I have made this my shelter. He said, aren't you afraid? Aren't you sad to be so alone? And she said, no, this is where I want to be. I find my peace here. I'm quite content here. And yes, indeed, he did think she would make a fine, fine wife. But in his heart, in this very short period of time that he has gotten to know this beautiful princess, Melangeth, he grew to know that he could not have her, that her destiny was quite different. So he said to her, he said this, you see all this land right here, Melangeth, this land can be yours. You can have it. You can have it for a monastery. You can have it as a retreat. And so it was. Melangeth lived there very happy for years and years and years. And many people all around the world have traveled to this very spot, for it is a retreat. It is a place where you can be quiet and heal and seek peace in the quiet. And it is said that in this area, if anyone is hunting a hare or goes to do any harm to a small animal, all you have to do is shout, Melangeth, God be with you. And you can be sure the hare will remain safe, and all the little animals too will never have any harm come to them. And I think that's a pretty neat tale, because who would think a patron saint of hares? That's pretty neat. Hope you enjoyed the tales and the songs.